for the fantasy football season. And here's a few wide receivers I will look to start this week. The first guy, I'm on St. Brown, the Detroit Lions. So St. Brown, he's coming out of nowhere in the early going. I know he got banged up in week 3 with an ankle injury, but still put in a decent performance for PPR leagues. So the first 3 weeks here, he's been a top 5 receiver. Week 1 versus Philly, 8 catches, 64 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 versus the Commanders, had a monster ball game. 9 catches, 116 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and 68 rush yards. So in that ball game, 37 fantasy points. And week 3 in Minnesota, like I said, he got banged up in that one, left for a little bit, but came back. 6 catches, 73 yards. So right now, week 4, tasty matchup. Detroit back at home. This secondary for Seattle, one of the worst secondaries in the league, especially with Jamal Adams out for the season from a few weeks ago with the torn quad. So right here, I'm on St. Brown. Fire him up. Once again, is the number 1 wide receiver. And he definitely could be in the running for the top receiver of the week here. So he's definitely a start. Number 2, Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Devonta Smith, week 1 had the old goose egg, but the last 2 weeks here, he's had some ball games, especially week 3 at Washington. A monster 30-point fantasy day for him in PPR leagues. Week 1 at Detroit, they barely target him. 4 targets, got the goose egg. Week 2 versus Minnesota, steady ball game. 7 targets, 7 catches, 80 yards. And week 3 at the Commanders, he went off in that ball game. 8 catches, 169 yards. A touchdown on 12 targets, and I think he left some meat on the bone in that ball game was Devonta Smith. He came out before halftime with about 130, 140 yards, and then second half, this Eagle team took it a little bit easy and ran the football a little more. And that's what we've been seeing the last 2 weeks here from Philly. They get off to a huge start, and then third, fourth quarter, they try to kill the clock and win the ball games, winning the last 2 with blowouts. So week 4 here, not the greatest of matchups versus Jacksonville in terms of what we've been seeing, but there's no way you could bench Devonta Smith for the next couple weeks here. Him and A.J. Brown, good 1-2 combo over there in Philadelphia. And Jalen Hurts is playing at a high level, but believe it or not, this might be the toughest test to date so far in terms of defense this Eagle team's versing. But I'm going to fire up Devonta Smith with confidence as receiver in my fantasy lineup. And he's a receiver to start this week. The next guy's Hollywood Brown. So Hollywood Brown off to a big start for this Arizona Cardinal team here. And I thought he was a decent pickup, but why would the Ravens trade him? Maybe something was up. But so far, Hollywood Brown, he's been solid with 1 monster game in week 3 as well. Week 1 versus Kansas City, 4 catches, 43 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 with the Raiders, 6 catches, 68 yards, 11 targets. And week 3, what a share of looks and a ball game. He had 17 targets, 14 catches, 140 yards. So right here, him and Greg Dortch, the 2 top target guys on this Arizona team. And we're going to see more of the same, I believe, here in week 4 at the Carolina Panthers. I know this Panther team played pretty decent versus the Saints, but when it's all said and done, Winston threw for over 350 yards in that game, and Tre'Quan Smith went for 100 yards in that ball game. So right here, Hollywood Brown and Dortch, I think, a decent starts this week in fantasy leagues here. The secondary, not too bad, but Kyler Murray, he always finds a way to get the ball to his receivers, garbage time or not, even though I think the Cardinals are the favorites in this one. I think Hollywood Brown has another good ball game, and he's a wide receiver I would start this week, because after coming off a 17-target game, there's no way you're going to bench a guy like that with all that volume. The next wide receiver I would start this week's Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we know Mitchell Trubisky isn't that good of a quarterback the first 3 weeks here. It just hasn't been an improvement from him from his Chicago Bear days to now. So week 1 in Cincinnati, 7 catches, 55 yards, 12 targets. Week 2 versus New England, 6 catches, 57 yards, 2-point conversion, 10 targets. In week 3 at Cleveland, 11 targets, 8 catches, 84 yards. So the first 3 games of the season here, he's been a target machine over double digits here, Deontay Johnson. And he's got a good matchup in week 4 versus the New York Jets. Right here, T. Higgins, he was on his way to a monster ball game before he left that one with injury, having 90 yards in the second quarter of play. So right here, Deontay Johnson's a target machine for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Chase Claypool hasn't done much. George Pickens, he hasn't done much as well, even though last week he emerged a little bit. And Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson, the top 2 targets in this offense over here. So this Jets secondary not that good, even though in the future I think they'll be pretty decent with some of the younger guys they got over there in that team. But right now, Deontay Johnson's got a good matchup. He's a target machine, and he's a perfect number 2 wide receiver to start on your roster this week. And the fifth and final wide receiver I look to start this week's Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So Courtland Sutton, he's been off to a pretty good start, but you can't say much about anyone else on this Bronco offense. Week 1 in Seattle, 4 catches, 72 yards. Week 2 versus Houston, 7 catches, 122 yards on 11 targets. And Week 3 versus San Francisco, 10 targets in that one as well. 8 catches, 97 yards. So he's the only guy it looks like that Russell Wilson trusts right now. Jerry Jeudy hasn't done much. He's banged up as well. Javonte Williams, Week 1 had a good ball game, but the last 2 weeks hasn't done much as well. Melvin Gordon hasn't done much. Alberto, not much. And Ken Hamler, not much as well. So Courtland Sutton, number 1 target. And he's getting peppered with targets as well. So right here with a good matchup Week 4 at the Vegas Raiders that don't do much on defense pretty much the last few seasons and obviously this year. Courtland Sutton, once again, I wouldn't be surprised if he has 80, 90 yards in this one and finds the end zone. So that's a few wide receivers I look to start here for Week 4 of the fantasy football season.